The first thing I should say and make clear is what I'm going to say doesn't necessarily reflect the views of the Vancouver Fair Copyright Coalition, although we do have a table upstairs with a flyer.
That you wrote?
I wrote a chunk of it, but I didn't necessarily write. Some of the things I'm going to say might not be in line with other members of the group think. So, and the other thing is, but both in my case and their case, what we're really fighting for is not getting things for free. I've been accused of that enough times. I think I'd better start with that. What I'm really worried about is the kind of society that I think that I'd like to live in. And what I want to talk about is monopolies of culture, monopolies of knowledge, and how control of distribution secured through copyright limits public participation and captures artists. We live in an increasingly complex technical society in which understanding public issues means having contact with expertise and experts, issues like copyright. But another example would be global warming. And in the case of global warming, it appears there's been serious media failure. The scientists haven't effectively reached the public. And a lot of people believe that global warming is simply a scam by scientists to get more research grants. At the same time, we have vigorous debate online. If you go to the CBC site, you can see how many people think it's all a scam. But I've seen another community where this has been successfully debated. A bunch of libertarians who, over a period of time, with expert explanations and of how propaganda is wrong by people actually in related fields, has shifted its point of view to be more concerned about global warming. But I just learned recently that there's actually a serious limitation on this. Because I'm a student at SFU and I have access to the electronic online journals out there. So if I want to know about global warming, I can actually go to the source, the public research that's been done by scientists. However, once I graduate, if I want to get access to that, I actually have to trek up to the top of the hill. So we're in a situation where public understanding of expertise is really important, but it's very difficult for us to get to that because it's been put behind a wall. It's not something the scientists want. It's not something the public wants. It's something that was put into the license agreements for the university and that actually the librarians at the university opposed. So here we have a monopoly of knowledge secured by copyright. But to look at the other side of this, how come the other side on global warming has been so effective at getting their message out? And I think that's because they haven't focused on reason. They focused on emotion and reaching people in their everyday lives and what matters to them. They've convinced people that if we act on global warming, that your house or your car, things that you love, are at risk. The American dream, Canadian dream, is at risk. And these things have been sold to them through emotions, through culture. And we have dramatically asymmetric access to culture when we want to participate politically. Because those who can afford access to culture can make their points, and those who can't afford it can't. And the irony is that much of the value of this culture, where it is popular, is actually produced by us. And I'll give you an example of this. Hockey Night in Canada theme song. Do you remember a couple of years ago when CBC did not renew the license for Hockey Night in Canada? And there was an outpouring of protest. They got letters to the editor, and their site was flooded with complaints, and people said, I don't care what you pay. Pay what it takes, get the theme song. The reported sale of the theme song was for between $2 to $3 million. We don't know for sure how much CTV paid. But I can guarantee you it wasn't worth that much the first day that CBC played the music. Now, the song is great. It's very good for what it does. But there could have been other songs that could have been just as effective. The reason people love that song so much is they've associated it with hockey for decades. They see it as a soundtrack of their lives. They associate it with things in their own lives. Now, when I spoke here a couple of years ago, I was very enthusiastic about the potential of the internet to encourage participation by people in culture. And I think that this is one of the first steps to democratic participation as a citizen. We learn to be citizens through participation. We form relationships with other people. But the thing is, when we participate in something, we invest part of ourselves in it. This is why artists are so passionate about their work and about copyright, because one of the cores of copyright is moral rights. The right to be attributed and associated with the work that you've done, that you've invested so much effort in. And nobody invests more in a piece of work than the artist who created it. But if we as participants also do that, and that is completely captured by a copyright monopoly, then it can be used to influence us. And there are efforts to do that, because works by artists, traditionally we think of individual works by individual artists, but increasingly what is owned by conglomerates is not artistic works per se, but intellectual properties, franchises, things like Star Wars, not the movie, but all the toys, the brands, the characters, the whole thing. And if you want to be an artist and participate in that kind of thing, you have to work for the company or pay a lot of money through a license. And now this is being extended to the activity of ordinary people. So for example, there's a recent video game that came out, StarCraft 2. And in StarCraft 2, players of the game make maps for the game. They extend the game. And some of the player-made maps for the previous version of StarCraft were more popular than the professional ones produced by the game designers themselves. So the company that makes StarCraft realized this, they saw this, and now there's a license agreement you click on when you play StarCraft that says any maps you create, you transfer the copyright to Blizzard. So you do the work, they own it. Now, one of the centerpieces, the thing that is the most problematic, for me at least, for the Bill C-32 is a digital locks clause. So I must explain what digital locks are. What a digital lock is a piece of software on a device that typically you own, like an iPad, a computer, a cell phone, that regulates what that device can do. It can regulate it in any way. It can limit it in any way. The argument in favor of digital locks and making it illegal to work around them is that digital locks, one of the things they can regulate is they can stop people from copying. But they can stop people from doing a lot of other things as well. And what they are being used for by large companies that produce this technology is to lock down channels of distribution, which is bad for artists and bad for the public. And what actually really scares me, particularly as a good example of this, is Apple's iPad. Because Apple's iPad, if you buy an iPad, you're not just buying an iPad, it's Apple's distribution channel. If you want to put software on the iPad, you have to get it from Apple. There's a lock preventing you from getting it anywhere else. So if you make a piece of software and you want to sell it to me and I want to buy it from you, we can't do that without Apple's permission. And if we worked around this, if Bill C-32 passes, we would be breaking copyright law. Now there was a political cartoonist, Mark Fiore, who made some cartoons. He made an app with some cartoons for the iPad. And he wanted to sell those cartoons. So he had to go through Apple's approval process. And Apple rejected his app because, get this, his political cartoons ridiculed public figures. They turned him down.
No, really?
Yes. So Mark Fiore, however, had won a Pulitzer Prize for his work. And so there was an outcry, and Steve Jobs said, oh, wait a minute, we're going to look at that one another time. And so they changed their minds about Mark Fiore. So if you win a Pulitzer Prize, you can probably get your app out on the iPad. But if you didn't win a Pulitzer Prize, this might be a problem, that Apple can basically censor the platform for any reason, and we're now proposing to make a law that says Apple has that right, and you could be vulnerable for, my reading is $1 million or 5 years in jail for this kind of activity.
Naughty boy.
Now, the other thing I said is that this won't stop piracy, which is true. You know, if I wanted to, and I haven't done this, but if I wanted to go home and pirate a DVD on my computer and give out copies to my family, it's really not that hard to do. And the government will never know, and I'm not going to be hit with $1 million or 5 years in jail. It's not going to happen. And that kind of infringement is going to continue. I don't think that's the real target of these laws. Because the effect of that is basically that the seller of the product doesn't get as much money from me. But it doesn't have any wider political implication that I can copy a DVD in the privacy of my home. What matters is public activity by artists. You know, if we're going to have activity around culture, the core of that is the artists who invest so much effort in it. And they can't break laws. And so the control of the distribution channel done through things like digital locks really restricts the ability of artists to act effectively and publicly. So I suppose I should mention some policy other than opposition to anti-circumvention clauses around digital locks, which is in order to enable things like these cartoons, I think that the fair dealing improvements, particularly parody and satire, and the YouTube clause, I think that sort of thing is very good in the law.
YouTube Plus. But that's because it's so badly drafted.
Okay, the idea
It's
of that.
so badly drafted.
You can explain to me in detail
Yes,
why
I
it's
will.
bad, but the principle of that, of allowing people to use culture for public action, I think is very valuable. Now, unfortunately, I was actually much more optimistic when I came here a couple of years ago and we had a really bad law. And I'm actually feeling more pessimistic now because I'm seeing this lockdown increasingly extended even though we don't have it embedded in law. And what I talked about then is that I had a great hope that in the 20th century culture shifted from something that we do into something that we witness. You know, instead of singing, which was a very common activity 100 odd years ago, we listen to music. Instead of playing sports, we watch sports. And sort of the archetypical cultural activity today is sitting alone in front of a TV set. And I think the internet has great potential to change that. But if it's locked down as a distribution channel, the great danger is that the internet will effectively be turned into cable TV.
And that's a bad thing?